It all began with a tiny broken thing, a cracked musical egg. When Lisa Marie was 5, she held its silent halves in her hands, feeling the cold metal, the faint whisper of paint, and said nothing. Elvis didn't understand why she hid those pieces in the corner of her room, clutching them as if they were treasures. 5 years passed, laughter echoing through Graceland's halls, glittering lights, the clink of celebration. And then, on the night of their grandest family gathering, Lisa Marie slipped her father's hand and led him quietly to her bedroom. Her eyes shimmered in the lamplight as she confessed in a trembling voice, "Daddy, I thought if the egg lost its sound completely, it would lose me too." Elvis froze, realizing that this fragile fragment held the secret she'd carried in her heart all these years. And now, at last, he was ready to listen. Elvis leaned back into the high-backed armchair in his Graceland sitting room, the soft glow of the parlor lamp painting golden halos on the ornate wallpaper. Outside, magnolias swayed in the warm southern night, their heavy blossoms perfuming the air with a fragile sweetness. Somewhere in the distance, a Spanish moss-draped oak rustled as a lone crepe myrtle shivered in the gentle breeze. Inside, the hush was broken only by the faint tick of an antique clock on the mantel, marking the final hours of a family celebration that had flowed with laughter and music, but now seemed distant, as if taking place in another realm. 5 years had passed since that ordinary spring afternoon when an unbroken music egg, an old plastic toy that hummed a lullaby when wound, had slipped from Lisa Marie's small hands and shattered against the polished floorboards of this very room. At the time, Elvis had scolded himself for leaving the door to her playroom ajar. He'd scooped her up, console in arms, smoothing back her dark curls and promising to repair what he'd broken, never realizing that the egg's fragile shell held more than a toy's simple mechanism. It had come to symbolize the child's tender grip on her father's safety. Now, on this autumn night, Lisa Marie stood in the doorway, clutching that same music egg, or rather, its broken halves, against her chest. She was 8 years old, though the expression on her small face lent her a gravity far beyond her years. Her violet nightgown caught the lamp's glow, the ruffled hems brushing against her slender ankles as she approached. The family party had drawn to a close hours ago. Her mother, Priscilla, and the guests had drifted off to bed, leaving these two alone in the quiet intimacy of their home. "Elvis!" Her voice was a tremulous whisper, and he stirred in his seat, his iconic profile etched against the lamplight. He set aside the half-finished glass of iced tea and rose with the startled grace of a man who still felt at home in any setting, even one so private. "Darlin', what is it?" He folded one hand at his back, the other hovering as if uncertain whether to offer a reassuring touch or simply stand and listen. Lisa Marie drew a trembling breath. "Daddy, do you remember the day you got sick at the studio? You don't have to be afraid to tell me." Elvis's heart caught at the earnest tilt of her head. His chest tightened with memories he had buried long ago. A distant afternoon in a fellow musician's booth, the sudden chlorine taste in his mouth as worlds spun, the fading of the band's rhythm, and the brutal hush he had imposed on himself in the days that followed. He had slipped away from rehearsals, insisted on no one knowing how close he'd come to passing out. The fear in her clear green eyes told him everything. She had heard more than he'd ever admitted. I was fine, sweetheart." He tried to smile, but it faltered. The secrets of that afternoon weighed on him like lead. How could he reassure the little girl who saw right through every mask he wore? Lisa Marie let the egg's fragments fall to the carpet, its tiny gears clinking softly. "I found this tonight," she said, voice quivering. In my closet, under my pillow. I kept it because I thought, if I prayed, maybe God would keep you safe. So every night, I wound it up and said, "Don't let Daddy go away." The words struck him with the force of a gale. He knelt, gathering the two curved halves in his strong hands. The plastic was warped, the spring loose, the once lilting tune silenced forever. Still, the weight of what the broken toy represented pressed upon him, the fruitless prayer of a child who believed she could bar death's door with a mere trinket. He drew a quiet breath and offered her the shell, palm up. "You never have to pray alone again," he said. His voice was hoarse, the tremor belying the composure of the stage. "I promise, Lisa Marie. I'll always come home." She clutched his hand and stood on her tiptoes, pressing a kiss to his wrist. Elvis closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of her breath, her resolute faith mingling with his own fear and love. For a moment, the grandeur of Graceland receded. The gilt frames, the marble floors, the velvet drapes, leaving only the two of them and this shattered symbol of her devotion. In that hushed room, father and daughter found a new beginning. The broken music egg, once a relic of a frightened child's nightly vigil, would be laid to rest that very morning. Elvis knew he could never mend it, but he would cherish its memory, and hers, forever. From the far corner, the mantel clock chimed midnight, its gentle bong a simple benediction, a call to healing, to honesty, and to the profound unspoken bond between a man who had once feared losing everything and the little girl who had begged the heavens to let him stay. When Priscilla emerged from the music room the following morning, she found her husband seated at the long mahogany dining table in Graceland's breakfast room. The sun was just breaking over the cypress trees, shafts of pale light sifting through the lace curtains. A plate of untouched scrambled eggs lay before Elvis, and his newspaper sat folded beside an unopened glass of orange juice. But his eyes were fixed on something in his hand. A folded letter, yellowed at the edges, penned nearly a decade earlier. Priscilla paused in the doorway, breath catching as she took in the sight. Elvis Presley, the man who moved millions with his voice, who filled stadiums night after night, now as vulnerable as any husband or father, confronting the echo of his own fear. She approached quietly, sliding a chair out for herself, and settled beside him without a word. He glanced up. The hard edge of yesterday's pain softened in his clear blue eyes. He tucked the letter into his shirt pocket. Priscilla reached for his hand. "Lisa Marie's safe now," she said gently. "And you're here with us." He managed a small, wry smile. "I know." But the tremor in his voice belied the stoicism he'd attempted the night before. Elvis unfolded the letter again, smoothing the creases with the care one might give a fragile photograph. The paper bore his distinctive scrawl, "My dearest Lisa Marie, if I don't come home tonight, remember I love you more than my heart can hold. You are my life's greatest melody. Always, Daddy." He swallowed hard, tracing the words with his thumb. "I wrote this, just in case. I was on tour and couldn't shake the thought that one night—" His voice broke, and he closed his eyes. "Priscilla, I was so tired. The shows, the travel. I collapsed in the hotel corridor, heart racing, sweating. Doctors said it was exhaustion, but to me it felt like I might never see her smile again." Priscilla reached up to smooth a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "You never told me about that." He shook his head slowly. "I didn't want to worry you. I'd convinced myself that I was invincible. But there I was, on the floor, alone, save for the echo of my own breath. I thought, what if this is it? What if I never get to tuck her in again?" His hand trembled as he set the letter down. She pressed closer. You came through it. You always do. He looked at the letter once more and gently refolded it. I never gave this to her. I kept it in a drawer. Too ashamed, I suppose. After that night, I promised Master Futaki that I'd never let my fear become a show, that I'd carry my strength quietly, like the grave of a silent guardian. He tapped the side of his head. But strength without honesty? It's no strength at all. Priscilla rose and retrieved a small jewelry box from the sideboard. Lisa Marie found something in her room, she said, opening the box to reveal a polished silver cross, dog-eared and worn. She told you about the music egg. I think it's time you told her this. Elvis took the cross in his hand, feeling its familiar weight. This was given to me when I graduated from basic training. I wore it every day, a reminder of home, of the mother who prayed for me. I meant to give it to her on her birthday, but I never did. His voice softened. I'll tell her now. Priscilla watched as he stood, the letter pinned over his heart, the cross clasped between his fingers. He strode to Lisa Marie's room at the end of the hall, each step measured, resolute. Inside the bright pastel walls lined with drawings and photographs, Lisa Marie sat at her doll's tea table, its small cups and saucers laid out as if awaiting guests. She looked up, startled to see him appear so soon after breakfast. "Daddy?" she whispered. Elvis knelt before her, smoothing the napkins on her tiny table. "Hey, darlin'," he said softly. She pushed her chairs back, rising to hug him. He felt her small arms tighten around his waist, her breath warm against his shirt. He took the silver cross from his pocket and unclasped it. "I wrote you a letter," he began, voice catching. He drew the yellowed paper from his shirt pocket and held it out. "And I've kept this close, because there was a night I thought I might not come home. But I did come home, and I want you to know—" He cleared his throat, unsteady for the first time. "That you are my greatest reason to keep living, sweetheart." Lisa Marie reached for the cross, turning it over in her fingers. "It's beautiful," she said, eyes wide. He smiled, tears glistening at his own eyes. "Just like you." She ran her finger under the script of the letter, tracing each letter. "I love you more than my heart can hold." He nodded, hugging her again. "Exactly." Priscilla stepped in, slipping an arm around her daughter. "We'll keep the music egg too," she said. "Your prayers kept Daddy safe, and now he wants you to have something that keeps him safe. Right here." She tapped her chest. Lisa Marie's face lit up with a mixture of pride and relief. "I prayed every night," she confessed, "so you'd come home." Elvis kissed her forehead. "And I came home," he repeated. That afternoon, he rescheduled his tour, carving out weeks to stay at Graceland. He called the record company to postpone studio sessions. On the veranda, with Lisa Marie tucked beside him, he wrote in his diary, "Today, I learned that love's melody is louder than any stage, deeper than any fear, and I vow never to forget that I am not alone." As the sun dipped behind the oaks, the family gathered on the lawn, laughter echoing in the golden light. The music egg lay on the coffee table inside, its shell silent but resonant with the secret it had carried for so long. Now, in the quiet sanctuary of Graceland, father and daughter would share their fears, their prayers, and their victories, together, unafraid, and in full view of the ones they cherished most. That afternoon, after the tenderness of revealing his hidden fears and reclaiming the cross, Elvis felt something shift deep inside him. For years, he had compartmentalized his life into neat, controlled boxes. One for the stage, one for Graceland, one for Lisa Marie, one for the world at large. But in that moment with Priscilla and their daughter, those walls cracked, and he saw that the most profound music he could ever make would be born not from lights and instruments, but from honesty and love. Late that night, long after Lisa Marie was tucked safely into bed, Elvis found himself at his Steinway grand piano in the living room. Its polished surface gleamed under the soft glow of the table lamp. He lifted the fallboard and pressed a tentative chord. The low, warm reverberation filled the room, speaking to the hush that had settled over Graceland. A faint breeze stirred the lace curtains, carrying the distant scent of magnolias and honeysuckle. He thought of the upcoming concert, how he had always approached each show as a flawless performance, a seamless spectacle. But now he wanted something more, a moment of true connection, a glimpse of the soul beneath the rhinestones. He called out, "Priscilla!" She appeared in the doorway, her robe tied loosely at the waist. "Yes?" He gestured toward the piano. "Help me with something." She crossed the room and sat beside him on the bench. He showed her a folded sheet of manuscript paper, his own scribbled lyrics, never before shared. At the top, in his unmistakable script, read, "For Lisa Marie." The poem-like verses spoke of childhood wonder, the tremor of a parent's love, the comforting warmth of a whispered prayer. Priscilla's eyes brimmed with tears as she read. "In the hush before the dawn, your voice rises, bright as song. Each note a promise, clear and strong. I am yours, and you belong." Elvis paused. "I want to sing this tomorrow," he said softly. "Not as a matinee number, but as a gift to her, and to everyone who's ever prayed in the dark, hoping someone is listening." She nodded, her hand resting gently on his arm. "It's beautiful," she replied, "and it's real." The next afternoon, backstage at the Civic Center, the usual frenzy was replaced by an unusual calm. Stagehands whispered in corners. Dancers stretched silently in the wings. Even the band members moved more thoughtfully, glancing at Elvis with anticipation. Word had spread. Tonight he would debut something deeply personal, something never before heard. As the house lights dimmed and the opening number concluded with thunderous applause, Elvis stood at the edge of the platform, guitar in hand. The spotlight bathed him in a soft halo, and the audience stirred, sensing a departure from the ordinary. He raised his hand for silence, and the very air seemed to lean forward. He took a deep breath, glanced at Priscilla and Lisa Marie seated in the front row, then spoke. "Before we go on, I want to do something different. A few nights ago, my daughter gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. My own fear, hidden away in a letter. She taught me that the scariest thing isn't falling, it's keeping others from knowing we can. So this song, it's for every prayer you've whispered when you thought no one was listening." He strummed the opening chords. The melody was gentle, a lullaby transformed into a hymn of reassurance. The lyrics, his own words, floated over the hall, clear and unadorned. "In the stillness of your heart, when the world feels far apart, hear my voice, where'er you are. I am with you, just as you are." Eyes brimmed across the audience. Some mourners from the front row of his own fan club dabbed at tears. Miners' children from rural Tennessee clutched each other's hands. Nurses, teachers, taxi drivers, all listened as if cradled in the palm of his voice. Halfway through, he paused, letting the final chord ripple. Then he beckoned Priscilla and Lisa Marie on stage. The little girl's eyes shone in the spotlight as she stepped forward in her simple white dress, clutching her father's hand. Elvis knelt beside her and gently embraced her, holding the cross against her heart. The crowd rose, resonance humming like a tide of shared emotion. Backstage, the moment lingered. Priscilla guided Lisa Marie toward a settee draped in velvet. The child sat between her parents, her small legs swinging. Elvis left the stage door open as the applause continued outside, a living echo. But here, in the quiet corridor, he turned to Priscilla. "I'm going to stay," he said, voice soft but resolute. "I'll finish this tour, but I need to build in time. Time for her. Time for us." She smiled, relief and love shining in her eyes. "We'll be here." For days afterward, the song, titled Whispers in the Dark, on the concert program, became the most talked-about piece of music in America. Critics praised its raw honesty. Radio stations played it between rock anthems and cover tunes. But the real impact unfolded quietly. Letters poured into his office from parents who'd lost children, from soldiers who'd heard the prayer in its opening lines, from strangers who claimed it saved their nights. At Graceland, life settled into a new rhythm. Elvis carved mornings for family breakfasts, lunchtimes for letters and journal entries about fatherhood, afternoons for rehearsals suffused with fresh purpose. The piano in the living room stood open, with that manuscript sheet now framed above it, a testament to the power of unguarded truth. One evening, Lisa Marie sat at his side, learning the melody on a small wooden keyboard. He coached her fingers, his voice patient and warm. Priscilla watched, leaning against the doorframe as father and daughter harmonized, weaving the words their hearts had shared so closely. In that room filled with laughter and gentle music, the broken boundaries between stage and home, between star and soul, dissolved entirely. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, found that his greatest performance was not under the electrified lights of Las Vegas, but here, in the tender space where a man and his child laid bare their fears and found connection more powerful than any encore. And so, the third chapter of their story closed not with a curtain call, but with a soft sigh of contentment. A promise fulfilled, a melody carried in the hearts of those who dared to whisper in the dark and believed they were heard. The years that followed that night of bearing hearts saw Whispers in the Dark travel far beyond Memphis, carried on radio waves and whispered from one soul to another in quiet moments. But for Lisa Marie, the melody's truest resonance came not from applause or airplay, but from the memory of her father's open confession and the way his voice had cradled her own childhood prayers. By the time she reached her mid-20s, Lisa Marie Presley had grown into a poised young woman, graceful, curious, and ever mindful of the legacy she carried. One crisp autumn afternoon in 1996, she found herself sitting in a warmly lit studio in Nashville, the very city where her father had once walked cobblestone streets in search of a sound that would change music forever. Behind the glass pane, the recording engineer gave her the nod. It was time. She placed the framed cross, Elvis's Army-issued talisman, on the piano and adjusted the microphone. The session musician strummed the opening chords of Whispers in the Dark, a few notes shy of the original key that had come straight from her father's heart. When Lisa Marie began to sing, her voice carried both a sweetness and a gravitas that spoke to its dual inheritance, the Presley gift of melody and the Presley pact of sincerity. When the night is still and heavy, voices falter, breath turns cold. There's a whisper you'll remember, words of warmth against the bold. Her interpretation introduced subtle harmonies and vocal inflections that reflected her own life's path, one shaped by whispered prayers and weddings, by motherhood, and by the sorrow of early loss. The engineers listened in hushed admiration, capturing each phrase with clarity and care, aware that they were witnessing a second coming of a song that had first lifted spirits in the dark of a 1970s concert hall. When the final verse faded, Lisa Marie spoke into the mic with a quiet confidence. This is for my father, who taught me that the truest music lives in our shared vulnerabilities, not our triumphs, and for every child who ever said a prayer in the dark, hoping someone heard. The recording, released as a single and coupled with footage of Priscilla Presley, cradling the original handwritten lyrics, instantly struck a chord. Music critics lauded it not as an inheritance riding on a legend's name, but as a genuine work of art born of real emotion. Fans old and new found themselves reaching for tissues, recounting the first time they had felt heard in their own loneliness. But beyond charts and reviews, the song's legacy took root in a far more tangible way. Lisa Marie partnered with her mother to establish the Presley Light Foundation, a charity dedicated to providing support and resources for families facing medical crises, educational hardship, or the upheaval of loss. Named in tribute to the glow of that whispered promise, the foundation channeled proceeds from the single concert ticket surcharges and private donations into scholarships, counseling services, and medical grants. In its first year, the foundation awarded grants to dozens of families across Tennessee, Mississippi, and Arkansas. Mothers like the waitress Mary Ellen, who had once shared a sandwich with a hungry child, and sons like Danny, whose guitar found its tunes in an anonymous gift from Elvis. Each recipient received not just financial aid, but the offer of emotional mentorship, a network of volunteers trained to be the ear that listens in times of distress. More than a decade later, the Presley Light Foundation had grown into a beacon of hope. Its signature annual event, An Evening of Whispers, brought together small-town choirs, youth musical groups, and rising singer-songwriters for a night of intimate performances. At the heart of every program was the story of that long-hidden letter, the cross passed from soldier to daughter's daughter, and the song that bound them all. On one such evening, held under the oaks of the Graceland courtyard, Lisa Marie stood at the podium in the shadow of the mansion's white pillars. Soft lantern light glinted on the instruments arranged before her. She began not with music, but with a recollection. 40 years ago, my father taught me that our prayers are never wasted, even if we can't hear an answer right away. Tonight, we gather as a family of all ages to remind one another that in the darkest hours, a single whispered word can be the spark of light we all need. The hush that fell was familiar, the same hush that had filled that civic center so many years before, when hundreds of voices held back tears and cheers alike. As Lisa Marie sang Whispers in the Dark, joined by a children's choir, her mother, Priscilla, watched from the front row, her eyes shining with pride and remembrance. When the final chord rang out, the courtyard erupted in applause, but more resonant than any clap was the quiet that followed, a shared collective breath of relief and hope. In that moment, the Presley story came full circle. Childhood fear transformed into lifelong purpose, private prayer woven into public compassion. And somewhere in the soft glow of the lanterns, among restored guitars and grateful families, one could almost hear Elvis's voice, carried on the breeze. I am with you, just as you are. In the end, the greatest legacy of that little broken music egg, and so many whispered prayers, was a reminder that true greatness lies not in the roar of the crowd, but in the courage to be vulnerable, to share our fears, and to listen as each other's souls find their voice in the dark.